In John 15, 1-8, Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples.
First John 4, verse 7 through 21. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. Beloved, since God loved us so much, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and do testify that the Father has sent his Son as the Savior of the world. God abides in those who confess that Jesus is the Son of God, and they abide in God. So we have known and believed the love that God has for us. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Love has been perfected among us in this way, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because he first loved us. Those who say, I love God, and hate their brothers or sisters are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from him is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also.
The gospel writer set this lengthy teaching of Jesus that Jerry shared with us within the intimacy of a meal with his closest friends. It was the last meal that they had together before Jesus was killed. He and his friends had eaten supper together before the festival of the Passover. And then during the meal, as an act of love, Jesus had washed the feet of each friend, including Judas, the friend who would betray him to the religious authorities. Jesus' teaching in this setting became known as his farewell address. in which he spoke comfort to his friends in the face of his death and the days that would follow. Through this text, the gospel writer also was speaking comfort to the early Jesus followers who remained suspect in the eyes of the established religious authority and who had been expelled from their community. The early followers were trying to make sense of the reality and impact of Jesus on their lives and to redefine community in their new situation. Many of them were homeless, landless, familyless, abandoned, and filled with shame. As words of comfort, Jesus offered a familiar image of a vine and a vine grower, a common image, a known task. As words of comfort, Jesus spoke of removing, pruning, and abiding. The vine grower removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. Maybe this did not sound too bad to the disciples if Jesus was talking about himself. If the removing and pruning were just going to happen to Jesus. But then Jesus implied and then clearly stated that the branches were his friends. The branches were the disciples. I am the vine, you are the branches. I wonder how the disciples heard those words then. You are the branches. The vine grower removes every branch in me that bears no fruit, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. Words of comfort, removing and pruning. I do not know how the disciples heard those words, but these words do not seem like much comfort to me. Everyone will be pruned. Everyone will be cut. The branch that bears no fruit and the branch that bears fruit, it does not matter. Everyone will be cut. Those of you who are gardeners know this reality. You know about pinching early buds to make the plant stronger and fuller. Pinching the first flowers produced by pansies will result in fuller plants and more blossoms later in the season. Some gardeners remove branches from tomato plants so that the fruit will be bigger on the remaining branches. Gardeners know about removing diseased and damaged leaves and limbs. But even when knowing and anticipating future results, I do not find it easy to prune beautiful petunias from scraggly vines. I do not like to remove extra branches from the tomatoes, especially if I have waited too long and they have blossoms already forming. Because sometimes pruning can seem like a violent affair, and in some ways it is, if heavy pruning is needed on shrubs and vines. The act of chopping, hacking away, can feel like death, and we might want to turn away from it. But pruning is a normal part of the life cycle. What can seem like death is a life-giving act for the plant and those who benefit from its fruit and shade. Pruning is a form of resurrection. but it does not make the cutting easier. It is one thing to chop away on a diseased tomato plant, and quite another to do it in our own lives and in the life of our community. In Jesus' words of comfort to his disciples then and now, in addition to removing and pruning, he spoke another verb, abiding. Abide in me as I abide in you. The gospel writer recorded that Jesus used the verb 8 times in this small section and drew the audience again and again into an image not of disconnection, but one of connection. Stay, remain, breathe, live in me. Abide your branch onto the vine grower's master roots, and there you will find a home, nourishment, and abundance, all that a branch needs to be healthy and give back to the larger ecosystem. Maybe Jesus used the word abide because just as the results of pruning are long-term investments and labor-intensive, so is abiding. The Greek root for abide carries a range of meanings: staying in place, enduring, holding out. Words that imply the steadfastness and reliability of God's presence in and for God's community. God does not abandon the community in the cutting. God's care is constant amid the pain of removal. The actions of pruning and abiding are both bring new life. It is the act of cutting that allows the branches to abide close to the life-giving roots of the vine. It is the branch's connection to the vine and to each other that ensures new life and new growth. The connection to the vine is not individual, singular. When Jesus spoke to his friends, he used the plural second-person pronoun, you. You all must abide with each other and with the divine. Make your home together in me. Well, Jesus' use of the word abide might sound transcendental, serene, or relinquished, something that could happen most comfortably on a couch or at the beach. There is something demanding about abiding. It is an imperative verb, something that involves doing, something we ought to start doing or at the very least keep doing. I am not sure that abiding is any easier than pruning, especially when I remember that Jesus started this conversation by washing feet. Washing the feet of friends who had forsaken him, who would forsaken him and betray him. Every one of them. It is not easy to make our home with those who have forsaken, betrayed, or hurt us. To make our home with those who do not live up to our expectations. But Jesus made it even more confusing for his friends and for us when he said that we already are the branches. We already are at home in him, just as he is at home in us. The nearness, oneness, and intermingling of the holy and the human is hard to fathom. Jesus dwelled among us that we might be one with each other and the divine. The cutting and abiding will not always be easy. Sometimes it will be very painful. The journey to love as Christ has loved is long, and it takes our whole lives. And what needs to be accomplished is already deeply true. Jesus' friends who betrayed and denied him were already fully inside the abode of love, as are we. As are we. I pray that during this sabbatical time, and it is a sabbatical time for all of us, there will be pruning and abiding for me and for the congregation. In this time with a different rhythm, which unfortunately will not include cartwheels because I don't know how to do them, I hope to discern what needs to be removed in my life so that there is abundance and new growth. I will also consider what practices of abiding I will add to nourish my soul and my connection to others. We as a congregation will also need to discern what might need to be cut, removed, or ended so that we can grow and flourish in new ways in this new time and place in society. In our discernment, let us hold on to this rich image of intimacy and vitality, this image of vine and branches, of pruning and abiding. Let us remember that our belonging and abiding is in our belovedness. In this is love, wrote John in his epistle, not that we loved God, but that God loved us and sent the Son into the world so that we might live through him. We already are deeply at home in love, and love finds its home in us. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. We are deeply at home in God. We are beloved. Let us also remember that we are becoming alive to love. Together in the humanity we share with Jesus, we may give our yes to love's invitation, to struggle to learn obedience in love's imperatives, to suffer love's deaths, and awaken to love's resurrection and new life. We become pruned of whatever is not life, is not love, in order that we become alive in love, alive in God. Let us remember to simply be love. We become love's very way of flowing as life sap flows through the vine and branches and fruit with an effortlessness beyond our efforts. Christ is in us. Love has been perfected among us, that we may have boldness, because as Christ is, so are we. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Our experience becomes less about any uncertainty of belonging or any struggle for loving. We simply are part of God's flow, of God's love. Beloved, be loved, and be love. May the Spirit of God move in our midst, strengthening the love that is within us and between us. May it be so.